So Airbnb gives you the most real-time data. Second to that, we compare that against what Wheelhouse shows us. Wheelhouse is a third-party pricing tool, but Wheelhouse now has an enormous amount of data that they supply. So we can go in Airbnb and do a real-time search and find out exactly what's in the market and what's missing. And then we can just do a quick comparative with the data that Wheelhouse is showing.
You're listening to the Guerrilla State Investing Podcast. We're not here to bruise your bananas with guru sales pitches, overrated fluff, or any other kind of monkey business. We simply provide the ground-pounding truth about what it takes to be successful in real estate.
All right, Guerrillas, today's guest from Columbus, Georgia is Coach Cav, an Army officer, and he is the founder of YourSpaceSTR.com. Coach Cav does rental arbitrage throughout the southeastern portion of the United States. He's got over 200 units that he manages and operates. And he also does some hard money lending to people who are looking to get started in short-term rentals. Coach Cav, how you doing? Welcome to the show, brother.
I am well. I'm well, Ramsey. Thanks. And I'll reiterate that I'm jealous of the logo there. So I've got to step my game up here.
I haven't come up with a name for me. I'm thinking Bruiser's good because I always ask people the question, what bruises their bananas? But it's a good looking logo, dude. I like the gorillas. Gorilla.
Pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Somebody, so I actually got asked on our new Facebook group, which is Middle Class to Millionaire Week. Somebody asked, why the gorillas? And the story behind it is it's Go Real Estate. So it's Go Real Estate, right? And I've just picked the gorilla because I thought it sounded cool, but I didn't realize it didn't translate quite as well as Gorilla Estate, but it's actually supposed to be Go Real Estate. And nice. I don't know, man, gorillas are cool. Why not gorillas?
I know. I can dig it. It's unique. And
yeah, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
With the market, right? It just has to rhyme.
So I gave you the quick wave top intro, but why don't you go ahead and elaborate on what your business is, what services you provide, how you got started, and how you scaled up to over 200 units?
Yeah, so the getting started is always interesting. Like most of us, right? We stumble and fall into things. Years ago, I had a good friend from New York, real estate agent. We just a normal catch-up call after a couple of years, and she started to elaborate a little bit on what they were doing with short-term rentals. At the time, we had a couple of traditional real estate rentals, and that's sort of the direction we were headed. Proof's always in the data. She showed me data from just a 6-month period of what they were doing with short-term rentals, and I was convinced. So less than 3 months later, I enlisted a couple partners on this first venture, and we went into New York City, which was highly regulated at the time, with 3 short-term rentals. And the rest is history. It gave us enough experience to understand that there was value in the market. And this was about 4 years ago. And since that period of time, we've built now over 200 listings across both the U.S. and Canada.
Oh, so I said southeastern portion of the United States, but you're actually the entire eastern coast, all the way up into Canada. What part of Canada are you in?
So we've got Saskatchewan. I may be jacking that up. So if you're from Canada and you're listening, I apologize. And Calgary, Alberta, are the 2 locations, but they're spread from Olympia, Washington to New York, down Florida, and as far west as Hawaii. So we're pretty spread out.
So how does one scale? So just back it up a bit. You do rental arbitrage. Will you explain what that means?
So rental arbitrage is simply the practice of renting a place for a fixed amount, say $1,200, and the difference that you're able to make from a short-term rental allows you to then arbitrage that particular property.
Okay, so you're essentially buying it wholesale and selling it at retail, right? I'm guessing you have about a year-long lease on the place, so you pay month to month or a monthly rate, and then you are allowed to charge a nightly rate, which is obviously going to be higher to the tenants who are going to stay in these places, correct?
Yeah, well, within our model, we don't do 12-month rentals because it doesn't give us and our investors enough time to recoup our initial investment. So we will not take on a rental unless we get a 36-month or longer lease agreement. So we master lease every piece of real estate in our portfolio.
That makes sense because you're going to have to furnish this place, right? And probably do some decorations, maybe some light repairs so you don't get the bad reviews. And so what would you say is the amount of money you have to spend to furnish a place like a standard 2-bedroom, 2-bath?
That'd probably run north of about 15 grand. Closer to 19 if we included vendor costs, which is our design team, the initial budget for the initial deep clean, maybe lawn care or anything that's required around it. But for furnishings, more specifically, about 15 grand.
Okay, so it's a pretty substantial investment, and that's why you need essentially a 3-year lease or a guarantee that you're going to be able to rent that place out for 3 years. Did you have to grow into that? I mean, how receptive are landlords to, is it a locked in rate? How do you approach a landlord?
No, so that varies by market, right? A landlord in Charleston, South Carolina will probably understand the value of their property from a short-term rental standpoint better than, a mom and pop landlord in Montgomery, Alabama. But that leads to different conversations. So, we've got a property in Charleston, South Carolina where we're tied into a 7% increase per year just based on the data. They don't want to be locked into a fixed rate for 3 years, which is understandable. So we tailor the conversations based on markets, and then in some cases based on how investor savvy the owners actually are. In cases where we can leverage deals, we will ask for just a fixed rate over a 3-year period to try to leverage our returns.
So are you approaching current homeowners or current landlords and asking to rent their places? Are you buying complexes that are on the market, renovating them, and then selling them as a turnkey package to the end user or the end buyer?
No, they're all rentals, right? Even in unique cases like Arlington, Texas, right now, we've got a deal in it. This may provide some additional context, but we've got a deal right now where we are master leasing an entire 44-unit complex in Arlington, Texas. And the value in this particular deal for investors and owners in this case is that we can go in as a short-term rental company and we can pay above market rent. So that's an immediate value add from an investor standpoint, because in traditional multifamily deals, the value adds surrounding some upgrades where you get $100 to $200 a door. So we come in and we say, hey, we can give you $300 more per door just based on changing the model from a long-term rental tenant to a short-term rental tenant. And now you get the added value with the traditional multifamily upgrades that are going to happen over time. And then what we're able to do just in a partnership effort, right? We're able to help those investors see expedited returns in 3 or 4 times returns based a differential based on their initial projections.
So if I currently own a piece of property, what makes it a good candidate for your model? Like what would make it where you would want to rent my place from me?
In some cases, the location makes it a slam dunk. But in every other case, we don't look at markets based on its geographical location, but we look at markets based on a value-based standpoint. And that's simply to say that, we conduct market research analysis to understand the traveler demographics and who's traveling. That allows us to understand what they need. When we peel those layers of data back, it tells us where gaps exist in the market. So whether it's a large market, a mid-sized market, or a small market, where we find gaps in the market, we find enough value that enables us to go into a market confidently. So, I can draw a distinction between a small town like Enterprise, Alabama, versus a large town like Houston, Texas. I couldn't drag investors to Enterprise initially, but everybody's raising their hand to go to Houston. But when we look at those two markets from a value-based standpoint, and what market offers the most value, the small market with 3 stop signs wins the race in most cases. But that's the look. So it's not necessarily a location race. It's more about the value and the data points that we see that help drive those decisions.
And what about a place like it? Because I'm familiar with Enterprise. What about a place like that? Like, why would people go to Enterprise and stay there in a short-term rental?
Well, I mean, the one thing, you've got the military market there. So what we do know that exists, the PCS seasons create an influx for families that have to displace for anywhere from a week to 3 months in some cases, waiting on housing, or they're leaving and they're getting out of housing early for some reasons. And then, you've got your regular contingent of government contractors that travel and flow into those areas. So what that does for us from a data standpoint, it gives us two distinct travel demographics that are not subject to market downturns, right? Like COVID put a dent in a lot of markets, but government travel didn't stop, or PCSs didn't stop. So those markets still perform pretty consistently, even during a major downturn like COVID.
Also, well, and that's I have some short-term rentals in Panama City, and I didn't say Panama City Beach, right? Because everybody's, Panama City Beach, that's easy. No, it's not on the beach. I've got short-term rentals on the city side, and people ask me all the time, like, why do people go to Panama City? And the answer, most people hear short-term rental and they hear vacation rental at the same time. But people travel for all kinds of reasons. Mm-hmm. Work. They travel for graduations. They travel for baseball or sporting events. They travel for tournaments that their kids play in. They travel for deaths. Some people will come stay for weeks at a time because the hospital nearby has, that's where somebody goes into hospice, and that's what I mean? The funerals, graduations, everything. People travel for all types of reasons. In fact, most of my tenants in Panama City are not traveling because of vacation. They're just traveling because people travel all the time. And it's a hard mindset to break whenever you talk to somebody and say, hey, you should do a short-term rental, like list your stuff on Airbnb. And they're like, well, why would somebody want to come to my town? Well, do people ever come to your town? Yeah, all the time. Well, that's why they would want to. I don't know. You just answer. Are there people in your town? Yeah, then people want to come to your town. So that I agree with what you're saying, and I see it predominantly. One thing that I do want to talk about is, how do you study a market? Because there's a lot of data out there. Like, what tools do you use? Are you using AirDNA?
No. We tell our investors to run and hide from AirDNA, and it goes back to my previous point, right? AirDNA in most cases, right, doesn't help you understand the value that your place can hold. And my running example is that, for example, in Arlington, Texas, right, we are right across from AT&T Stadium. So based on the travel demographics, the events that are happening yearly that we can template out, AirDNA is going to give us 12 months worth of market data that's going to tell us around about where to price our units. But we want next level data to say, hey, where are the market gaps that can help us exploit, right, what's missing in the market, and to charge, right, more per night. And what we found in the Arlington market, in my example, is that the large group demographic in Arlington exists. The demand was there based on the events in the market, especially at AT&T Stadium. But the market itself, when we did our initial market research and analysis, had 5 homes that can sleep between 12 to 16 people, that had kid-friendly amenities, and also allowed pets. So when we saw that data point, that gap in the market, we sought to exploit it. So what we did was we built each 2-bedroom apartment out to sleep 8 guests, and then we created a double listings, right, where we combined 2 listings to create a third listing that sleeps 16, has the requisite kid-friendly amenities, and offers pets. And now what we've done is we've created value in a market that didn't exist. So for that large group that's traveling to AT&T Stadium that may happen to have a kid and a pet, we have no competition in the market. So now we get to set the market prices in that specific market, and it's all based on what we understand our value to be, and not what AirDNA tells us that the market's commanding.
So where are you finding that initial data from?
So Airbnb gives you the most real-time data versus any third-party site. Second to that, we compare that against what Wheelhouse shows us. Wheelhouse is a third-party pricing tool, but Wheelhouse now has an enormous amount of data that they supply. So we can go in Airbnb and do a real-time search and find out exactly what's in the market and what's missing. And then we can just do a quick comparative with the data that Wheelhouse is showing. But those are the 2 sources that we use to do that initial market research and analysis.
Can you give me an example of a bad short-term rental, or something that you would say no to?
From a location standpoint?
Either way.
If I wouldn't feel comfortable walking my kids after 6 p.m.
Yeah, definitely bad location. But I mean more along the lines of is there houses that are too big versus the rent expectations, or is there a size that's too small, like studios, or is there something that just doesn't meet your model, or is there a place for everybody and everything?
No, so that's a great question, actually. So let's just go back to enterprise, right? And in the South, typically your rental rates are pretty cheap, right? You can get a 3-bedroom home for $900 a month in a town like Enterprise. In Enterprise, I would not take a 5-bedroom home that rented for $2,500 a month. And the reason why is because the market does not have the requisite demand for groups that large on that consistent of a basis to drive revenue. So the sweet spot becomes, a 2 to 3 bedroom home that can meet the market demand. You can exploit market gaps. But in certain cases like that, you've got to understand where market caps exist. And, I always tell investors, one important thing to understand is that you can never outprice your value in the market, right? Yeah, I mean, you can assume that your place is worth $250, but that assumption may lead you to a bunch of unoccupied nights, and that simply means that you're overpricing your value in the market, and that becomes important to understand because from a professional pricing standpoint. You want to be sure that you are priced adequately in the market, and then you're allowing those third-party tools to drive your pricing based on market supply and demand.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, oh man, I might sneeze. But what is a desirable occupancy compare average nightly rate and occupancy balance? Because it's a constant balance. If you price too cheap, your occupancy might be high. Mm-hmm. If you're priced too high, your occupancy might be too low. What do you aim for? I know everybody wants to be 100% occupied, but at some point you got to say, I'm not charging enough. What is kind of your formula for that?
Yeah, so we baseline from an occupancy standpoint between 65 and 70%. I wish I can show you our pricing tool, but we have a pricing tool that we built, and what it does is it gives us the ability to go in and put in an investor's expected profit margins for a particular investment. We baseline that against 3 different levels of occupancy data. That then gives us a recommended nightly rate. That's the rate that we go in with as the base rate for that property, or we put that into Wheelhouse. But what that allows us to do in 100% of our places is it ensures us a profitability for these places if we or when we hit those benchmarks. But we've got the data spread across three different scenarios, so it's sort of best case to worst case. But as long as the units are booking within those parameters, we can ensure our investors, in this case, profitability.
Do you see a market saturation coming?
You know what? I don't believe in market saturation. As funny as it sounds, but my running philosophy is that saturation only exists at the bottom of a market, right? You always will have a certain subset of homes that will compete with each other. And this gets back to the value-based discussion and understanding where market gaps exist. And at the end of the day, before you publish a listing, you should know, right, the value that place will hold in the market. You should be able to go in and say, based on my market research and analysis, right, we've got, these 7 or 8 traveler demographics. Here are the gaps that existed in the market. Here's what we're going to offer in the market. So that spells out the value that you're going to have. If you have that level of data going into listing or publishing a short-term rental in any market, then you'll ensure yourself that you're not competing with the entire market for what's offered in the market.
The thing that scares me about it, and because I dug into this, I had to give a speech out in San Diego, specifically about this, and it's not the competition in the workspace. To me, it's the inflation of prices in tertiary markets, because the rural spaces, especially the mountain homes, the lake homes, they are the prices of these homes are going through the roof because of COVID is definitely had this pent up travel, which international flights are still down. And it's short-term rental is like the new hotness, right? So whenever anything's hot, there's going to be a lot of people doing it. And I think there's a lot of people traveling, but the price of the homes is going through the roof with the rest of the market. But it kind of concerns me, especially for those tertiary markets where there's a lot of homes that aren't 3-season homes or 4-season homes that are good rentals. But if, let's say, ordinance changes or something along those lines, there'll be a lot of people who are stuck with a high-priced place that they can't rent out.
Oh, I think I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, you started to go out as you were talking about the tertiary markets.
Oh, just I don't know what I had already said. Sorry, listeners, my my internet went a little shaky there. But in the tertiary markets, especially the places with lakes and mountains and stuff like that, where you normally could get a house for relatively cheap, own a second home. A lot of attention has been put to those places because the pent up travel and international flights being turned off and stuff like that, and the prices are being driven up. Do you have any fear of those places? And I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just trying to set expectations here that if the prices get driven up too high, that eventually, if let's just say you get stuck only being able to long-term rent this place because the city ordinance changes or something like that, is it sustainable for the long haul?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in those markets that, and I'd probably offer that that what you're outlining is unique to certain markets that are vacation rental heavy, unique markets in mountain areas, cabin towns, things of that nature that could be subject to that. But if that happened and we were, for example, in any of those markets, I guess our exit strategy would depend on if we brought or if we're renting, and probably why I'm more of a fan of having a rental based model, because it enables a much easier exit strategy in cases where the long term may have to convert to a traditional corporate long term, and then that may have to convert to a traditional rental, or just exit out of the agreement altogether if all things fail.
So with that 42 unit that you said you were paying a couple $100 over market price, if the city ordinance changes and says you can't do that anymore, what do? You have to convert on that lease, right?
Yeah, we'd obviously come out of the lease at some point, but our immediate exit strategy is always to go to a traditional corporate long-term rental model, and then the tertiary exit strategy is then to go to a traditional lease. So
that's the fear because I own a lot of multifamily, and I get people like yourself who make these proposals, and I'm not trying to put you in the hot seat. I really need clarification on this, on what someone like your plan would be. If I got a 42 unit multifamily property and you rent every unit from me and say you're going to pay me $100 over market rent, and then something happens and the city says Airbnb, VRBO is no longer allowed, and then you come to me and say I want to break the lease, I'm probably going to tell you hell no, right? Because it's a lease. You're still there? I don't know. My dang internet is sucking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you hear the whole question?
Mm-hmm. So just for clarification, discussions like this with investors or owners are long and fruitful and thoughtful, and in cases like ours, as I'm sure you would have, you'd make sure that every risk mitigation factor that could be talked about or put in place would be there. So if that were to happen, for example, in Arlington, what we've agreed to in this case would be to act on behalf of a traditional property manager that would help relet the properties back into a traditional model. So we would ensure that there'd be a smooth transition from us vacating short-term rental unit X to long-term rental traditional tenant. So those are the discussions that we have, or have risk mitigation factors that we've put in place to help that discussion along and help the owner feel more comfortable with the model and what value proposition we were bringing.
And do you guys have to put deposits down for each unit, or do y'all? Okay.
Yeah, the front end of it's no different. But in this case, because it's all going short-term rental, their risk and from a loan standpoint is much higher. So the asking deposit I think it's 2 or 3 times more than what it would typically be. But that's just
That's like my fear as a building owner, because it's kind of like a triple net lease, right? Like I provide the building, and you put all the utilities in your name, you run your business out of it. And this is something I'm interested in, and I've actually talked with quite a few people, because I'm more interested in the ownership side than the operation side. Mm-hmm. The thing that scares me is having one customer or one tenant. Mm-hmm. And whereas if I've got a 40-unit building, I got 40 different tenants in there. If one of them has a hard time paying rent, I got 39 other paying tenants. Whereas if I got a 40-unit building and I got one customer, someone like yourself, and you fall on your face, well, now all of that risk has been pushed to me. I could overnight become 100% vacant. And I'm just trying to have this discussion so that people can hear the concerns from the owner side and the operations side. And it sounds like you've got a pretty fair thing set up for where both sides are comfortable. You put down deposits. You have a smooth transition if things go south, and there's the risk is bought down. And that's what you would have to do with somebody like me is I need you to buy this risk down with some funds. And I appreciate that. And I'm actually kind of interested in what it is you guys provide, because the benefit to me as a building owner is I'm immediately 100% occupied. Mm-hmm. And I've got 3 years lease. And if things go well, that's 3 years. I don't have to worry about a lease turnover. I know that you guys are deep cleaning each room multiple times a month. I know that the maintenance is going to be on point because you're held accountable to reviews. There's a lot of benefits to it. But with every benefit, there's an associated amount of risk. And it sounds like you guys have kind of dialed in how to mitigate that risk, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have 201 units under your management, right? So
yeah, the other thing to note too with this structure. So yes, my company does have the master lease, but within that, we're not allowed to have more than 4 units, right, per entity. So because we have an investor-based model, really, the framework of this doesn't change, right? So think of each door. We bring an investor in as a tenant to each door. So the same way you would have and look at a normal 12-month tenant, we have investors that we put into these investments in the same capacity. So instead of in this case, right, the owner having 44, being 100% occupied with 44 traditional long-term tenants, we have 44 investors that have invested a substantial amount of capital to conduct their business under our umbrella.
Oh, so yeah, so you have on this 40-unit building, each unit is kind of assigned to a different investor to run that unit themselves. How does that work specifically?
Right. So this goes back to the framework of our business model, right, where we provide all the administrative overhead, the design, and the backend management for investors. So what we do is we essentially sell, right, each door as a turnkey Airbnb investment opportunity. So as we bring investors in, they get assigned to a unit, they pay their funds, we assign, interior designer, tech install, we do all the back-end management, and that's their responsibility, right? And then unit 2, unit 3, unit 4, on to 44. So it's no different from a framework standpoint. We just replace a traditional tenant with an actual investor that's investing capital into our business model to do it for them.
And so the investors earn a percentage of the return, or they earn everything, and you guys a one-time fee set them up and you're done, or how does that work?
We manage the back end, and in most cases, some of our larger deals, we're contracted with a company called Journey to oversee some of our large deals. But in most cases, we provide back end management. So that management fee becomes part of our operational costs.
And what does back end management mean?
It's just your property management. We call it the back end. So the initial admin portion, sort of the front end, In the middle is the interior design and the setup, the tech install, and the back end is all the property management day-to-day stuff.
Okay. So if I'm an investor and I come to you and say, hey, I want to invest in your model, what is it that you're telling me?
So we provide each investor with an investment packet that walks them through our market research and analysis. It gives them a financial outlook, sort of like a prospectus you'd see, but it's just short-term rental related. It's centered around value, and then it gives them a detailed financial breakdown on estimated net and gross revenue per month and per year. And then they've got a startup cost that's associated with everything that's required to get into these investments. Once they go through that, typically we set up a call, answer any questions or concerns they may have. And if they're ready to move forward, we then get them out a service contract and an invoice for their investment. And then we put them into the investment timeline. So pretty straightforward.
Part of those upfront costs is the furnishings that they're going to have to provide, putting the utilities into their name, whatever your service fees are and design fees are. And what's a typical packet cost?
I'd probably say somewhere between 28 to 32, since most places are two to three bedrooms on average.
Okay, so roughly $30,000, and then it's a 3-year investment. What can I expect to make back, and what is it passive for me? Is it active for me? Like what can I expect?
It's passive. So this is a hands-off process for investors. We save them their 1,440 minutes a day, but on average, their cash-on-cash return typically ranges from anywhere from 50 to 110% based on the particular market. But our goal is to help investors see their initial principal back within 12 to 18 months. So they've still got significant time on the back end to profit off the investment.
And then after the investment's gone for 3 years, I've already bought all these furnishings and everything. Can I continue on with your services, or is it a done deal and the furnishings get sold off?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So normally what happens is at the 12-month mark, we do a yearly review with our owners. We will determine at that point, at the 12-month mark, if we're going to extend the lease out to 5 years, or if it's just going to stop at 36 months. So the investor will know early on in the investment whether we will come to a halt, meaning that we'll have a decision to make on either moving it to another investment or we help them sell it off if that's their wish, or if they decide to come get it in a U-Haul, that's their privilege. But in most cases, at least the ones that we've had that have come up, after 3 years, furniture has a good deal of wear and tear. We put it on the market for investors to get as much out of it as we could, and sold it.
Okay, and so I guess where normal investors are, there's a normal investment at the end of it. There's a sell off, and you get your return of investment, or return of initial capital back. There is no return of initial capital back from this, but you have a much higher rate of cash on cash return throughout the 3 years. Correct. So based on your numbers saying 50 to 100%, I could expect to double, maybe triple my money in 3 years.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds like a pretty good investment. I imagine that's why you don't have too much trouble getting investors. I mean, is it 201 individual investors, or do you have investors that do 3, 4, 5, 6 units at a time?
Yeah. So we have right now currently about 80 to 90 active investors across our portfolio. We do have a handful of properties that we keep internally. But we have investors that have pretty aggressive goals. So we have a couple that are 8 to 10 deep, and we have a handful, maybe 7 to 8 that have somewhere between 2 to 5 properties.
Okay. And do any property owners come to you and say, I'd like you to do this to my property?
Yes. we actually have an owner who we just took the fourth property from the homeowner. So he's buying with the intent to lease them to us, get his immediate long-term stability. We turn them over into short-term rentals, and everybody's happy.
Okay, cool. So this is very interesting, and I'm sorry if I seem confused throughout the way. This is all new to me. It's very creative. It's like you found a way to kind of, I don't want to say syndicate, but merge capital and leases together, where normally you merge capital and mortgages together. Mm-hmm. And this is true arbitrage, and it's even arbitrage of arbitrage, because typically what I hear people when they talk about rental arbitrage, it's them putting their name on the lease. They assume all of the risk. It's a 12-month lease. They put the furnishings and the utilities in their name. And then they have to basically do all of the active stuff to be able to take something off the top. And I know that there's a lot of people who are more on the management side, where they just charge 20, 25% gross income, and they manage it all. And from your aspect, what's the benefit of doing what you guys are doing with investors versus the management model, where you just manage and charge 25% off of the top?
Because we understand that in every market deserves a turnkey solution, or it will develop one, right? That's capitalism. But that's a huge gap in the short-term rental industry that there wasn't, and there may not be still, a company that provided investors with a path to investing completely hands off. So with our comfort in our market research and analysis, we're able to comfortably say that, if all things go to hell, right, we are okay absorbing our inventory based on our market research and analysis, that these properties will do well and perform. So that allows us to build the infrastructure that we do, where we take on all the administrative overhead, put in all the design teams to get places designed, and then assume back-end management for investors.
That's insane, man. All right. Well, I want to move on to the three questions that I ask every guest that comes on the Real Estate Podcast. The first question is, what is your biggest success in investing? Like, what's that moment that you were like, all right, this is starting to happen?
I'd probably say when we took a home in Summerville, South Carolina, 5-bedroom home, just Summerville's right south of Charleston. And we really started to build out, right, a true shared economy model, where we were able to take one of our RVs, plug it into the property, have a dedicated transportation service out of Charleston available to guests, and provide rental car services via Turo to guests. And then the kicker, and you've probably never heard this before, but don't laugh at me, right? So we took the home in Summerville. We created a listing that combined a home in Savannah, Georgia, with the home in Summerville, South Carolina. We created, with the transportation company out of Charleston, we created a rate sheet that will allow a guest to book, right, that both homes. So you can travel between Summerville, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. You get all-inclusive travel with the package, and we set a set rate through Airbnb for this particular state. But even though we tested it out and eventually killed it, what it helped us understand was the potential that exists in ways that were not tested across Airbnb. But it was all within the guise of creating a true shared economy, where we look across the shared economy, and we we try to maximize every inch of the home, and in terms of its value in the particular market. But that was the point where, we really dug in and said that, we can truly put a dent in what we're doing here from a short-term rental standpoint.
Did it book out quite a bit?
Excuse me?
Did it book up quite a bit, those two homes together?
We had 3 reservations over the course of a year. And regulations caught up. Somerville changed their regulations. Homeowner decided to sell shortly after that. So that particular listing eventually went away. But the times that it did book, they booked for an excess of like $14,000 for a 3 to 4 night stay.
People just got money, man. Got money, dude. Well, where did they get it from?
in this case, too, right? Location mattered, and in the proximity between those two unique areas enabled that. This probably wouldn't be possible in 2 other towns, but the Charleston, Savannah markets are very unique, as you know.
Yeah.
So when you're able to put something like that in place between 2 unique markets, tying transportation assets for travelers, then you can create a unique experience for someone.
What is the most unique place that you guys list?
I'd probably say our RVs, and they're not a place, but our RVs hand over fist do much better than our short-term rentals. And the thing I always talk to our investors about is RVs provide you with the most diversification from any asset, right? I can take an RV and I can list it on PeerSpace and allow photographers and photo production companies and or corporation to rent it. We've had an RV go out to Raymond James Stadium to provide COVID testing ahead of the Super Bowl last year. We've had, our RV go out to the Belmont Stakes in New Jersey. We've had our RV go out for 30 days to a family that was remotely working, and they decided to travel to the Rocky Mountains for 30 days. And when it's parked, we can dually list it on Airbnb. Or tie it to any one of our short-term rental homes and park it there and add added value to that space. So when you peel that back and you look at the different asset classes and you say, how much more value can an RV provide me than a single home? It's not even a close equation. And then in most cases, like our 37-foot Class A Thor, it still commands about $400 a night. So on average, being out 21 to 23 days a month, the net profits on those RVs are pretty substantial compared to most of our short-term rentals.
That's interesting. When you said you were renting RVs, I thought you meant they were parked and you were just renting them overnight. Direct renting them kind of like RV USA or whatever it is, but just on what platforms are you using for that? Are you using Airbnb or Toro or?
They're listed on Airbnb, but mainly RV Sharing Outdoorsy for a majority of the bookings. But again, just the whole concept of the sharing economy and, being able to leverage an RV on Airbnb as well as PeerSpace. I'm not sure if you're familiar with PeerSpace, but it's an event-based platform similar to Airbnb, but you can rent out your home, or in this case, an RV by the hour, to film crews, production, photographers. Someone wants to, host a small event. They can book through PeerSpace, but it really just enables you when you think about, highest and best use with an RV and being able to leverage it across multiple shared economy platforms. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck.
Dude, you can rent out your pool. You know that? You can rent your pool out. Like this is a whole, we could go on a whole other episode at just like, what can you rent out? And that's really what business we're in. You know, everybody's renting something. At least on my podcast, we're either renting houses, renting cars, renting RVs. There's people that rent their pools out, man. Out here in San Diego for about $45 an hour, you can go rent somebody's backyard and pool and everything. They're just chilling in the house while you and your family just soaking it up. That's good stuff, man. Well, what about your what's that?
Highest and best use.
That's right, man. If you ain't using it, might as well. But what's your biggest failure in investing? Or I shouldn't say failure. What's your biggest mistake?
I'd probably say we had a 10 unit investment. We went into Louisville, Kentucky. Due diligence wasn't there on the front end. I think we were more excited early on about the deal. It come to find out the owner was also the maintenance guy. He was also the plumber. He was also mopping floors. So the building started to deteriorate. That doesn't, bode well for short-term rental guests. We were shuffling people, losing money. We had to file a complaint with the city to legally come out of the lease agreement. And what it cost us was one, hey, knuckleheads, do your due diligence on even the owners, right? Because every deal on the surface just isn't a good deal, especially in our model, because then we had 10 investors or 9 investors we had to reposition into other investments without costing them money that we eventually absorb to honor their investments.
Okay, that ain't no good, old Billy Bob.
No, it's like, hey man, can you get your plumber over here?
Yeah, let me call him.
It's pretty easy to have a simple PMS set up to absorb maintenance issues and track things, but when everything's via text and call me here, send a picture here to prove something, just
yeah, I hear you. All right, well, let me ask you the real estate question, which what really bruises your bananas about the world of real estate?
It's probably the notion that you should do a certain amount of things to be listed on the front page of any platform. And the reason why that becomes such a false statement is because every traveler, most travelers have a unique need, which only means that they're going to go into the filter box and search for something specific to their travel needs. So it's never where you start, right? It's where you finish. So if I'm parading around being on the front page, but I don't have a pet friendly place, and there's a pet show in town, I'm of no value to that specific traveler demographic that's looking for that specific thing. So the whole front page thing, to me, it's more of a myth that exists. But again, you want to compete for as many traveler demographics as possible, and in order to do that, you've got to understand that they're going to go in and search for something. So you've got to be in tune with the filters that exist and offer as much as you can with your listing.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if this is just a me thing, but I don't like the first listing is the least likely that I'm gonna pick, because if it looks great and it's the first one, I'm probably gonna be like, well, I haven't had anything to compare it to. I'm gonna start scrolling, or I just assume the first one's a paid advertisement. I don't know what it is, but I don't ever pick the first of anything. I just go ahead and keep scrolling. Now, if you ain't on the first page of Google, I don't even know if you exist. But whenever Airbnb, it's a scroll. It's completely different. Like I'll look through 20, 30 pages of it just to see if there's a place I really like.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you on that, man. Well, hey, Coach Cav, this has been great, brother. If any of my listeners want to get a hold to you, ask you more questions, partake in your services, invest with you, I know that you've got some templates for beginners or even experienced people on your website for lease agreements and things like that. How do they get a hold to you? What's the best way?
Best way is to join our text community by texting the word club to 202-918-5027. That's text the word club, CLUB, to 202-918-5027. That will bring you into our text-based community. It's where we share investments, we share short-term rental data, get a chance to ask questions that are answered by someone on our team in real time.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I hope you consider me part of your network now. I'm going to have some questions for you in the future.
Absolutely.
I like your style. I like what you got going on. And listeners, reach out to Coach Cav. He's got a lot of good stuff going on. His website's well made. It's easy on the eye. Coach Cav, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely, Ramsey. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Gorilla State Investing Podcast, where we give you the ground-pounding truth about what it takes to be successful in real estate. Learn more at realfocus.org/Gorilla State Pod.